Hi everybody, it's Alex. I'm doing a review of Cuckoo today. So usually when I do 2024 or new releases, I want to do a non-spoiler review and a spoiler review, but because this movie's saving grace for me was the concept, and I have to kind of explain the ending to get that situated, this is gonna have spoilers. So if you haven't watched it, go watch it and come back, because it's a fun discussion. I actually like this movie, but it was executed poorly, so we're gonna talk about it. I'm gonna recap you through my thought process during the full movie like I always do, but I want to make some points first so you can see where I'm coming from. So this is basically nature versus nurture. That is what this concept is about. We hear a lot of talk about this. I actually studied it for people who are serial killers or just have a killer instinct, we'll say. Was it their nature? Were they born with it? Were they always going to do this? Or was it nurture? Because we know a lot of serial killers have trauma or they come from a difficult home life. That concept is definitely put into a lot of undertones of movies. I mean, a lot of slashers have disturbing backstories, but this was doing it in a more literal way in terms of nature and science with the cuckoo. So the cuckoo bird. Cuckoos basically lay their eggs in other birds' nests to save them time and resources. So that's where that reference comes from, and we see that literally spoken out in the movie. The movie does a good job of telling you the story. It doesn't do such a good job at showing it or showing certain parts. When the movie ended, my first question was why and how. Why are we studying this? Why are we trying to impregnate and reproduce this breed of monster, this humanoid thing? Why are we reproducing it? Why are we on this quest for science? It's okay for me that that wasn't addressed. In terms of science, people find concepts and they test them. People discover things and they study it and they test it and they experiment. When we go to the dark side of science, especially in history and especially in German history, which I don't know if that's why this took place in Germany, if that was a parallel there, I don't know. People have done tests on humans that abuse them, that manipulate them, that are cruel to them, that are non-consensual, that are sometimes not even known to the person undergoing the experiment. They do that for their own self-serving purposes, whether that be a quest to figure something out, or they're just demented and want to play with people. So I don't really think that question needed to be answered. However, the how needed to be. I understand maybe they're setting up for a prequel or a sequel, whatever. But when we have this nature versus nurture argument, and we don't actually see how important nurture is, and we don't see what is required in that nurture, the ending is a little bit lackluster because there's so many assumptions, you don't actually know if it's nature versus nurture. So now instead of tiptoeing around that, let's talk about it. So Hunter Schafer is the star of the show. She's the main character. Her name is Gretchen. And we find out very quickly that she is living with her dad now, and her would-be stepmom, even though she does not call her that. They don't have that kind of family connection. And her stepsister or half-sister. She is clearly the black sheep. There's clearly tension. So Alma can't speak, so that's one thing that's made very clear right away. And Gretchen's mom passed away, so that's why she's gone with her dad. It does tiptoe around that for a while, and that brings back an important plot point, so we'll get to it. So they move to this resort. They're staying in this resort because they're gonna help the resort owner. I can't pronounce his name. I think it's her. I'm just gonna call him the resort owner, okay? So the resort owner wants them to build this new home on the resort, like a little cabin. So that's their relationship, and Gretchen is not a part of this plan. So Beth, her stepmom, and her father, they actually honeymooned there 8 years ago, where their daughter was conceived. They celebrate this as like a cutie little reason they're back, why they're so tight. And you get weird vibes from this resort owner right away, like he's just a weirdo. But sometimes I'm like, is it weirdo on like a spiritual sense? Because sometimes when you're at these fancy resorts or these really spiritual places and it's a white man, they go that way. I wasn't really sure what the vibe was going to be or what the story was. At this point, I had no idea. Pretty quickly, we get introduced that there's something weird going on. There will be like random women throwing up and disoriented, and never in my mind did I think like morning sickness. That never came to my mind. I was just like, oh, is this a sickness going around, like an actual plague? And that's kind of where my mind went first. I went through some kind of like possession or feeding, but it's not really like that. The very intro of this movie has a scene that doesn't make a lot of sense until you get into it, but there's a family fighting or struggling. I'm not really sure what's going on. And an adolescent girl runs out into the woods and she hears this screeching and her ear is twitching. I didn't know. I don't know what was going on. It was really spooky. And then that's left as is. So the spooky part starts when Hunter is chased by this woman. She's wearing a trench coat, but what happens is she does this hypnotizing call or scream, and time warps. You get stuck in this time loop, and then she can come up on you and do something to you. So sound is a really big thing. So the story really starts with Hunter being chased by this woman. She's trying to explain. She gets run off the road when she tries to run away. And the police are like, oh, this is what your story should be. You can tell the police are being a little bit weird about it. And she is now her against the villain, against everybody. We all know the trope I don't love. But it works out good in this movie, and it changes pretty quick. Because a detective, who was actually someone who was let go from the force, comes and says, listen, I need you to talk to me. I need you to trust me. We need to be together on this. What I thought might be a plot hole, but it actually makes sense, is she's trying to get away from this woman. So this main monster, I'm going to call her the mother. So the mother stands out in front of them in the road and is clearly targeting Gretchen. It's clearly targeting her. And there's a line very near the end that says the reason she's a problem is because she's stealing resources from her young. And that makes so much sense why she's targeting her. The concept of adoption or, step parents in nature and in real life, sometimes we have those really great stories that we see on the dodo, but sometimes in the wild, if you go into a family where the offspring is not yours, the animal will kill it. So this makes sense that it's seen as a threat, not necessarily something they're going to take on. And this is when we start building humanity, because right now we're just dealing with a monster. We hear the sound, there's a warp, she's got a weird face and a jaw, which, by the way, this wasn't scary enough. That's what I need to say right away. This was not scary enough. The concept was great. What was done was not executed properly. There was not enough visual, and when there was visual, it was underwhelming. And I'm saying that, so you know it's true. So we don't actually know at this point what the mother wants. All we know is in the lover's nest, which is where I guess honeymoon couples go, or just couples in general, they usually knock out or take out the man, and they have this gooey substance they try to put onto the woman, who usually ends up choking to death. The whole point of this is they're impregnating the woman. They want the woman to carry their young. That's kind of why it's like the cuckoo, because the cuckoo puts it in a different nest. And this is when things get really weird. So one thing about this resort owner is he's always playing the recorder. It's pretty clear right away that he knows what's going on and he has some control over it. But again, I'm still thinking this is some kind of monster, and maybe this goo that they're giving them is making them sick and killing them. That's what I thought. I never dreamt that it was some kind of infertilization, reproduction, preservation type of concept. So Alma is having seizures. I didn't connect that this would be part of the story. I seriously thought it was maybe she was hearing the screeches and then he was trying to just pin it on Gretchen because she knew too much. They kept saying it was her fault. She was stressing Alma out. You could see that Alma was now taking all of their attention. Gretchen's been in the hospital twice now, and her dad really dismisses her. Beth can't give a crap about her. And you really kind of see there's a star child and then there's Gretchen. But what the movie does a really good job of doing, Gretchen has a soft spot for Alma. The two sisters, they're not really the ones that have the beef. There's no resentment there that I could pick up on. There's a lot of resentment with Beth, the stepmom, but in terms of her dad, it's more of a begging, literally in the hospital, but just wanting that attention and love. And she calls her mom a lot and leaves her voicemails. Although her mom is dead, this is something she does that helps her or soothes her, and so when she really needs someone, she calls. Because at first she thinks she's actually trying to get a hold of somebody, and that's what her sister thinks. So that's what Alma thinks. Alma makes a call and leaves it on the voicemail, and we know this because when they send the box of her mom's things, the voicemail recorder, whatever you would call that, is in there. And Alma leaves a message saying, I hear her trying to reach you every night. If you could just call her and tell her you love her, it would mean so much, and you could come visit anytime you like. And that's when you really just get to see a soft spot for Alma. So I thought she was going to be a plot point in that Gretchen would need to save her. I never dreamt she was going to be the bigger picture in all of this. So Gretchen is working with this detective Henry, and he knows everything. He knows a story, he tells her about a man and a woman and all this stuff, and he wants to kill this creature. But they have to keep it secret, so this is just them kind of in this bubble. And she's kind of hinting at the resort owner that she knows. She's really dangling that in his face. So he's like, we need to get rid of them. So he tells her he's going to give her a ticket and she can go. And he brings her to one of the resort rooms, whatever you call that, a cabin. Henry's there. The cop has a gun to the back of his head. And apparently he was let go from the force because what is happening to everybody happened to him. His daughter was taken from him, his wife was killed, and he is now more on a vengeance sort of thing. But I mean, he's still the good guy right now. Even though he's questionable and his morality will come into question, and we'll talk about that. So this is when we realize you're not getting on a train. He's not helping you escape. He's not giving you any money. He has this emptied out pool where he has a bed, and he actually lures in the woman screeching, but it's not the mother. It's the girl that we saw run away at the start of the movie. So she is clearly another one of these. Again, at this point, I am still thinking it's some kind of sickness or just like breeding of monsters in a zombie sort of way. Like, you know, give them your fluid and they turn into it. Not that they're trying to reproduce and sustain themselves. Even though this is hinted at a lot, the resort owner is very, I'm a preservationist, and he's talking about all these things. So when you go back, you can pick up on it a lot, but not until the later dialogue do you really get into the meat of it. So he doesn't let the woman actually do everything to her. It's more of like, I guess, experimenting with control as well. But something that's very interesting in this scene is that Hunter sees some humanity in her. When they're face to face, Gretchen goes to grab her face. He has to use a recorder to be like, no, stick to your mission, and she starts screaming again. So we see that there's some humanity in them, and this is where they lost me in the scary. You can have humanity in a creature and still make it terrifying. In that scene in particular, they have a jump scare where she shows up behind her and smacks her ears. I was ready for the jump scare, and I was ready to be scared, and it was such a like, she just kind of walked up and went boom. Like, it was such a letdown, even how they set it up. Like, the camera pan, like, everything was just not great. But we see this in a lot of horror movies and even TV shows. I think about iZombie. When she goes angry and the zombie comes out in her, she becomes unrecognizable and is scary. That's what I wanted from this. I mean, just looking uncanny is not scary enough. Like, if you're screaming and your jaw's dropping, sure. But you don't look scary enough. I understand that humanity plays a big role in this. They want you to see the human in the creature. And I also understand wanting to look like a mother because the mother is a monster. But I mean, there are creatures in the wild with motherly instincts that do not look friendly or wear trench coats. I mean, bears are very maternal. Mountain lions. Why couldn't we make her more scary? Because all of this leading up to this, when there was no real story substance, was leaning on the scary part. And although the time warps and everything were scary, that really spooked me, it's underwhelming when the creature coming after you is like, you look like Karen at Walmart. Like, I'm not worried about you. Yes, do you look creepy and possessed? Sure, but I feel like I could just pop you in that big mouth of yours. So Henry manages to get out and he shoots the resort owner. We kind of know he's not going to be dead. And this is where everything starts to unravel. We find out that her sister is actually a part of this big experiment. Because Beth and her father conceived this child at that resort 8 years ago, she was actually a victim of this cuckoo bird concept mixed with a human. What they were building was actually another mating ground for that younger girl that they created. Unless I'm getting this mixed up, that younger girl was Henry's daughter, but he realizes, oh, you're not actually my daughter. Like, you are not mine, you are a creature. When he rescues Gretchen in the pool scene and he has to kill her too, there's no mercy for her. And it shows that. He has no mercy, he doesn't see humanity. And that's a really big point, and this is when we're gonna get really into the nature versus nurture. So Alma was bred to be one of these creatures. These seizures she's having, she's responding to her mother. They wanted to bring her back there because they needed to introduce her to her mother. They needed her mother to be a part of it and see how they interact and how things change. This is something we needed to be shown. When we had that other girl's plot point, they should have shown it, whether in flashbacks or actually shown it, or even started Alma on that path to show what nurturing does to this timeline, to this process. Because they're trying to make the point that Alma needs to be there and be nurtured and to have this instinct groomed so that she can really become one of these creatures and then grow up and breed herself. But they don't show that. And because she's 8, who's to say that when she doesn't reach puberty, that instinct doesn't naturally come and she will be naturally a born killer that's born to do this? Because she's not old, well, I was a late bloomer, but she wasn't old enough for this, and she didn't look like that was a concept in it, and we don't see any nurturing. If we want to discount the nurture argument, we need to see it, because at this time, we don't know if she will progressively get there anyway, which is the nature, or if she needs to be nurtured. Although the assumption is nurture because that is what the resort owner is pushing so hard for, we as a viewer have no visual representation of that. We have no idea how you get from point A to point B. We need that. And that could have been the very creepy visuals we needed. That could have made it more scary. But what I do like about all this is where we get a very strong parallel between the resort owner and Henry the detective. I mean, at the end, how they both die is completely parallel, like gun to gun, Spider-Man looking at Spider-Man, you're done. They both go on this annihilation for preservation, but of different things. So the resort owner is killing everybody doing the experiments, he's trying to hide all his tapes, but he's also trying to still save Alma and what's left, because he needs them to keep them going. If you get rid of all of them, they'll be extinct. So he's trying to preserve what he thinks he can nurture. I don't believe he's trying to preserve it for nature, because if it just had to do with letting her live, and she could go turn at this wherever, I don't think he would be as concerned as keeping her there. So for me, because he's a scientist or he's the one behind the experimenting, I think he knows a lot more about the nurture that I wish he would have freaking told me. But then Henry is the nature side, where he believes they are monsters. There's no humanity in them. They are these creatures that were bred to kill and to take advantage of people, and he just wants to kill Alma. So we get this really big battle now because Gretchen and Alma are in between this. And this is also when we see the monster mother monster, and she has that very strong maternal instinct, which also gives her a little bit of humanity, in my opinion. So Gretchen preserves herself by walking with Alma with a knife, saying, if you get close to us, I take out your daughter. And that causes the monster to be like, yeah, you know what? I'm not getting involved. I'm not hurting her. But I still think you could have gave her that humanity without making her look like a mother. And I know they didn't need to give her the wig, but the wig scene that we're getting to where she drops the bloody wig, kind of iconic. So I forgive that. Battle scenes, the chasing scenes, I get the needing to cover your ears and the time warp. But again, it was just underwhelming. I wanted a little bit more scary. It was more action and Macho Man. Like, it's like we concentrate on these two guys who are basically nature versus nurture, but in a gun battle. Like, it wasn't horror, which I think they missed the mark there. But I do like how the story went. So she does kill the creature, and Gretchen again sees her humanity, at least we think. She gets up close, she's looking into her face and her eyes, but she takes the wig. And so he's not believing that she killed the creature, and Gretchen's like, here, I did. And he starts to spiral. And now he needs Alma. He is desperate to take Alma. He thinks even without the mother, something can be done. And the fact that he controls him also makes me think nurture. But again, we have Henry who is like, Alma has to die. And this is another moment of where we see Alma's humanity. She has these abilities, you know, her ears twitching, she's twitching. You can tell she's born differently, but nothing in her character says that she's turning into a monster. But again, does she need nurture or does she need puberty? It's so unclear. So they're in the back room and Gretchen's trying to convince her to come with her, and you can tell she's nervous. She convinces her by telling her she heard the message, and she lies and says her mom called, which I bawled like a baby. But then the trust is there. So this is, again, I love this parallel, because Gretchen comes out and her and Alma are just like this. The resort owner won't shoot Gretchen in case he hits Alma because he needs to preserve her. And Henry won't shoot Alma because he promised to protect Gretchen and he couldn't protect his wife. And it's just so cool to have both of those parallels, because you're supposed to be rooting for Henry, really. And at that point, I'm not. I'm rooting for Alma and I'm rooting for Gretchen, even though I wrote down, can Alma really live? Can we keep going with her? Alma realizes the danger they're in. And my question is, did she just learn this from where she was? Or is this an instinct? Because she covers Gretchen's ears and she does the time warp scream, and that's how they escape. So she has the abilities. She knows what to do with them. Is that from her time here, or is that instinctual? It's a little bit scary. The movie ends with Gretchen taking Alma and getting out of there, because in Gretchen's mind, it's nurture. That Alma has these abilities. I mean, at the end, her ear is twitching, but she's just going to be born differently. She's not going to act on her instinct or what she was bred for. And I lean to that because it was so important for them to be there and have mating grounds and stuff like that. But at the same time, that nature argument is there because we have not seen how nurture progresses it. We don't see what is needed to get from point A to point B. So I do think it's a brilliant discussion of nature versus nurture. I do think I loved the way the story went. I love the two parallels between the two guys. I love the humanity aspect. But in terms of a horror movie, they did not up the horror enough. They had so many opportunities. I mean, was anyone really killed? Most people were spared, were they not? Even the cop, when she went in with the hotel attendant, like, people were spared constantly. And the story was a really good twist. The Alma twist was really good. I'm glad I didn't circle back to the parents because they were just a plot point. I just feel like if we would have got more horror and visually more nurture, what nurture looks like, and what Alma would have to go through, at the end, I could then feel confident saying, Alma may really be okay. But if this is a path she's on, who's to say when her maternal instincts kick in, or maybe even when she gets pregnant it doesn't spread? Like, there's so many unanswered things there that we didn't get to. It just ended up being Annihilator versus Annihilator. You know, different motives, but the same outcome, which I do think that's a powerful storyline. It should have been in there, but we just didn't get enough Cuckoo. You know, I just needed a little bit more. I just don't feel like they fully thought out the take. Because me as a viewer, I'm not left on a cliffhanger in an interesting way. Like, oh, is it going to be nature or is it going to be nurture? I would like to make some of that assumption myself. I don't feel like I was given enough. So let me know what you think about this one. I also just watched The Hitcher, so that one's coming up very soon.